Jai Gurudev. Today we have the pleasure of discussing an important topic with an art of living expert and an officer of the Vedic Dham Sansthan. The wisdom of His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankar Ji emphasizes the balance between authority and love when correcting mistakes. How can one overcome the habit of constantly pointing out others' mistakes? Jai Gurudev, and thank you for having us. Gurudev's message is profound. Mistakes are a natural part of life, and while it is important to correct them, doing so without authority or love can lead to resentment, misunderstandings, and distance. The key is in knowing when to step in and how to step in, balancing authority with genuine care. Can you explain the concept of authority in this context and how does it relate to correcting mistakes? Authority is the understanding or expertise we bring when correcting someone. For example, as you mentioned, if your loved one is eating chocolates excessively, you cannot simply tell them to stop. You don't have the authority of a doctor to explain the harm scientifically. But if we bring in facts from a medical perspective, quoting a doctor's advice, or studies that show the negative effects of too much sugar, you are exercising indirect authority. The person may be more inclined to listen because they recognize the validity behind your concern. That's exactly right. Authority isn't always about holding a position of power. It can be the knowledge or experience we rely upon. For instance, if a teacher points out a student's mistake, they do so from a place of authority as they are equipped with knowledge. But a teacher also needs to ensure that the correction is done with love and care so the student feels supported, not criticized. Can you give more examples of where authority and love work together in everyday situations? Sure, let's say a parent notices their child spending too much time on electronic devices. The parent may have concerns about the impact on the child's health, eyes, or studies. Now, rather than simply pointing out the mistake by saying you are spending too much time on screens, the parent can take an authoritative approach. They might reference guidelines from health professionals or studies that show the negative effects of excessive screen time. At the same time, they express love by explaining that they care about the child's well being and want them to stay healthy. Another example is in the workplace. Imagine a manager who sees an employee making mistakes repeatedly. Instead of constantly pointing them out, the manager could offer guidance and training by showing them how to do things correctly and explaining the rationale behind the process. The manager exercises authority, but doing this with a supportive attitude shows the employee that they are valued and the correction comes from a place of care. That makes a lot of sense. So, authority and love must be present in equal measure. Yes, they go hand in hand. Too much authority without love can feel oppressive, and too much love without authority can lack direction. For example, a coach correcting an athlete's posture or technique must be authoritative in terms of their knowledge of the sport, but the correction will only be well received if the athlete feels that the coach truly cares about their progress. Exactly. Let's take another example, an elderly family member who refuses to exercise despite knowing it's important for their health. You don't have the authority to command them, but you can quote a doctor or share scientific findings. However, it's love that will guide your approach. You could say, I want you to stay healthy and strong for many more years because you mean so much to us. That's a beautiful example. It shows how love softens the impact of correction. Indeed, love makes the correction more palatable even when we use authoritative knowledge. It's the love behind it that makes the person feel cared for rather than judged. Take the example of a friend who might be smoking. You may not have the authority of a health professional, but you can express your concern by quoting the dangers of smoking from trusted sources while also showing how much their health matters to you. I will give another example related to tradition. If someone in the family is not following certain rituals or customs, simply pointing out that they are wrong won't work. However, if you explain the meaning and importance behind those customs, perhaps referring to scriptures or traditions, you are using authority. But again, it is essential to express how much their participation means to the family and to the continuity of tradition. This creates a balance between authority and love. That's an interesting take. So, how do you approach situations where the correction is not immediately welcomed, even with authority and love? Patience is crucial. Sometimes, even if you come from a place of authority and love, the other person may not be able to accept the correction. In these cases, It's important to allow time for them to reflect. For example, if you tell someone to reduce their sugar intake, they may not listen right away. But if you consistently share information from health experts and continue to show that you care for their well being, they may eventually reconsider. A good example of this would be when someone is following an unhealthy lifestyle, like eating junk food regularly. You may not be a nutritionist, but by quoting reliable sources and expressing genuine concern for their long term health, you create a foundation of authority and love. Even if they don't change immediately, the seed is planted. What about in situations where mistakes are pointed out in a public setting? Does this approach still apply? In public settings, the role of love becomes even more important. Publicly pointing out someone's mistakes can be embarrassing and lead to defensiveness, but if you approach it gently by perhaps discussing the mistake privately afterward and quoting an authority, be it a guideline or a rule, the person is more likely to receive the correction positively. Another example is in group settings such as a meeting or classroom. If a student or colleague makes a mistake, calling them out harshly in front of others can damage their confidence. But if you acknowledge the mistake in a way that is constructive and explain why the correction is necessary, perhaps referencing standards or guidelines, you use authority. Pair that with encouragement, and the person will feel supported rather than ashamed. Thank you for these wonderful examples. What final advice would you give to someone trying to break the habit of constantly pointing out others' mistakes? The key is to practice awareness. Before correcting someone, ask yourself, do I have the authority or knowledge to correct this? Am I doing this with love? It's important to reflect on whether your correction is genuinely for the other person's benefit or if it is coming from frustration or ego. I agree, and remember that mistakes are an opportunity for growth. When you approach correction with both authority and love, you create an environment where people feel safe to learn from their mistakes. That's how you build trust and deepen relationships. Thank you both for this enlightening conversation. It's clear that authority and love are essential tools for correcting mistakes in a way that fosters growth and connection. Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Jai Gurudev, thank you for the insightful discussion. I would like to delve deeper into the wisdom of Gurudev's quote. Don't make the mistake of constantly pointing out others' mistakes. Mistakes happen all the time. To correct them, you need both authority and love. How can this advice be applied practically in everyday life? Gurudev's quote is profound because it reminds us of our own limitations. None of us are perfect, and mistakes are inevitable in all our interactions. When we constantly point out others' mistakes, we may inadvertently project a sense of superiority, or we may come across as overly critical. But Gurudev is reminding us that true correction happens when we blend authority, whether it's from knowledge, experience, or expertise, with a sense of love and understanding. Exactly, authority without love can seem rigid and unyielding. Love without authority can feel wishy washy, lacking substance. For example, if you notice someone making a mistake in their spiritual practice, perhaps they're not performing a ritual or a Sudarshan Kriya or a pranayam correctly, you can't just tell them they are wrong. You need to first establish that you understand the ritual deeply, then explain it in a way that shows care for their growth in the practice. That's a powerful distinction. Could you explore some more specific examples that further illustrate this balance? Absolutely. One example comes from parenting. Let's say your child isn't completing their homework properly. Constantly pointing out the mistake, like saying you always forget to do your work or you never focus, won't inspire improvement. However, if you sit down with them, show them how to manage their time better, and maybe quote their teachers' advice on homework techniques, that's using authority. You reinforce it with love by saying, I want you to do well because I believe in your potential. The child feels both supported and guided. Similarly, in personal relationships, especially among couples, one partner might repeatedly point out minor mistakes like leaving things around or forgetting small tasks. If the other partner is always under a microscope, it creates tension. But if the partner says something like, I know you have had a long day, but I read that keeping the space organized can reduce stress, they are referencing a broader authority like psychological studies and softening it with love, showing that care about their partner's well being. I like how these examples emphasize understanding. Let's explore more everyday examples where this advice could be applied. Let's take the workplace. Suppose a colleague is consistently missing deadlines. Instead of saying you are always late with your work, a more constructive way would be to offer help. You could reference a time management technique you have learned, like from productivity experts, and say, I came across this approach that's helped me a lot. Let's see if it can work for you too. You are bringing both authority through knowledge and love by showing you are invested in their success. Another place this comes up is in friendships. Imagine your friend has a habit of overindulging in unhealthy food. You could point it out bluntly, but that might make them defensive. Instead, quoting the authority of nutritionists or health experts, you might say, I read that too much processed food can really impact our energy. I want us both to feel our best. Maybe we can try healthier options together. You are making the correction, but also showing you care for their well being, not just criticizing. That's very true. When love is present, the correction feels much more positive. What about in more sensitive areas like personal growth or spiritual development? Spiritual growth is a delicate area where because people can be sensitive about their beliefs and practices. Suppose someone is not meditating regularly and you notice it's affecting their peace of mind. Instead of pointing out you are not disciplined, you can use Gurudev's teachings as a reference. You could say Gurudev often speaks about the importance of regularity in meditation to stay centered. I care about your peace and I feel regular practice could help you. You are citing an authority they respect while reinforcing it with love. Another powerful example could be when someone is struggling with anger or stress. Rather than saying you are always angry, you could gently remind them, Gurudev says that stress comes when you are not in the present moment. Why don't we meditate together to help us both stay calm? This way, you are pointing out the mistake but using both authority and love to offer a solution. This is a very compassionate approach. It takes the sting out of pointing out mistakes. What other situations come to mind where this wisdom can be applied? In leadership roles, this balance is critical. For instance, if a manager constantly points out employees' mistakes without offering constructive solutions, it can create an atmosphere of fear or resentment. But when the manager quotes best practices or expert advice like leadership books or industry standards, they are using authority. By adding, I know you are capable of great work and I'm here to support you, they are bringing love into the equation. It motivates the employee rather than demoralizing them. A similar situation can arise in teaching. If a student makes repeated mistakes, it's important for the teacher to remember they are a guide, not just an authority figure. Rather than just saying you are wrong, a teacher might explain in mathematics. These principles are really important for solving problems. I'm confident that with a little more focus, you will get it right. The teacher uses their authority in the subject but pairs it with encouragement and belief in the student's ability. These examples show how correction can actually foster growth instead of resistance. What about more personal examples like family dynamics? Family dynamics are a great place to practice this wisdom. Let's say a sibling keeps borrowing your things without asking. Constantly pointing this out can lead to arguments. Instead, you might say, it's important to respect each other's belongings. I read that in family dynamics, open communication helps avoid misunderstandings. By bringing in the authority or broader knowledge about respect and communication, you are backing up your point by adding, I love that we share things. I just want to make sure we both feel respected, brings love into the conversation. Another example in families is when parents want their children to follow certain values or traditions rather than imposing those values. A parent could quote a respected authority like spiritual texts and explain why these values have been upheld. They could say, in your tradition, honesty is one of the greatest virtues. I want you to grow up strong in your values because it will serve you in life. The authority comes from the tradition and the love comes from wanting the best for the child. It's clear that Gurudev's wisdom applies to such a wide range of situations. What final thoughts would you like to share with our readers on this topic? Gurudev's words remind us that correction is not about control, it's about helping someone grow. If we point out mistakes all the time, it comes from a place of impatience or judgment. But if we approach correction with both the knowledge of what is right, authority, and the care for the person's well being, love, it becomes a path to mutual growth and understanding. I would add that every time we correct someone, we should ask ourselves, am I doing this to genuinely help them? If the answer is yes, we will will naturally balance authority and love. By embodying Gurudev's wisdom, we not only correct mistakes but also strengthen our relationships, allowing love to be the guiding force. Thank you both for this enlightening discussion. It's clear that Gurudev's wisdom on authority and love is essential for navigating life's challenges with grace. Thank you for the opportunity to share. It was a pleasure, Jai Gurudev. Thank you for that. Let's delve a bit deeper into how to cultivate this balance of authority and love in our interactions. It's easy to understand in theory, but in moments of frustration, how can we practically remind ourselves to approach mistakes this way? That's a great question. In moments of frustration, our first reaction is often to correct the mistake impulsively. But if we can pause and take a deep breath, it gives us the space to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. One practice that helps is remembering our intention before we speak. Ask yourself, am I saying this out of love or out of irritation? If irritation is leading, it's better to take a step back and approach the situation after we have calmed about. Another useful approach is reflecting on our own mistakes. When we recall how we felt when someone corrected us, whether they did so with kindness or harshness, it gives us insight into how we should correct others. Yes, this pause is key. Gurudev often teaches the value of mindfulness in our interactions. By being more present and aware of our tone and intent, we naturally shift toward a more compassionate approach. One practical technique is to mentally step into the other person's shoes before speaking. Imagine how they might feel and what kind of correction would best help them grow. It softens our approach when we come from empathy. That makes a lot of sense. So it's about creating a pause before reacting to allow love to be part of the correction. Could you share some more examples of how this can be applied in real life situations, especially within the Art of Living community? Absolutely. In the Art of Living community, this balance is often seen in the way we approach teaching and learning. For instance, during Sudarshan Kriya practice, some new participants might not get the breathing technique right. Rather than simply pointing out the mistake, teachers gently guide them, sometimes quoting Gurudev's wisdom on the importance of patience and gradual learning. The correction is authoritative because it's based on the science of breath, but it's always given with encouragement and love, helping participants feel supported rather than judged. I remember an example where a senior member of the community noticed that a junior colleague was consistently arriving late to satsangs. Instead of confronting them with a harsh reprimand, the senior member first shared their own story of learning the importance of punctuality through spiritual discipline, quoting examples from the Bhagavad Gita. They then offered practical suggestions on time management and assured the junior that they were more than capable of making these changes because they saw potential in them. The authority came from personal experience and ancient wisdom, and the love came from genuine wanting to help the colleague grow. These examples highlight that when authority is rooted in compassion, it fosters deeper connections and growth. Could you share examples where this balance of authority and love has been particularly important in healing or resolving conflicts? One powerful example is in relationships where trust has been broken, such as between friends or family members. Let's say someone has been dishonest or hurtful. Instead of pointing fingers or continuously reminding them of their mistakes, healing happens when you approach the situation with both firm boundaries and forgiveness. You might quote spiritual teachings on honesty and trust, drawing on the authority of wisdom of, say, Gurudev, and at the same time express that your intention is to heal and move forward in love, not to dwell on the past. This approach also works in community settings. Once during a large project within the Art of Living community, there was a misunderstanding between two teams which led to delays and frustration. Instead of blaming one another, the project leader brought everyone together and using Gurudev's teachings and meditation also and mediation on team spirit emphasized the importance of collaboration over competition. The correction wasn't about who was right or wrong, it was about reinforcing the shared goal both with authority and love for the entire group. The project leader spoke with the authority of experience and with genuine care for each member's contribution, which helped resolve the conflict smoothly. These are excellent examples of how both authority and love can be applied in situations where tensions might otherwise rise. How does one continue cultivating this approach as a lifelong practice? It's all about self awareness and continuous learning. Gurudev often emphasizes that we must first be gentle with ourselves before we can be gentle with others. When we are too harsh on ourselves for our own mistakes, we are more likely to be harsh on others. So, cultivating self compassion is essential. One way to do this is through regular meditation and mindfulness practices, which help us stay centered and less reactive. When our mind is calm, we are better equipped to correct others with love and not just authority. Another key is to continuously reflect on our interactions and ask, did I bring enough love into that situation? This self reflection helps us improve with each interaction. And let's not forget the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive influences. When we are in a community that embodies this wisdom, like the Art of Living community, we are constantly reminded of this balance in our interactions. It becomes a natural way of living where authority and love coexist. Reading spiritual texts, attending satsangs, and engaging in seva or selfless service also reinforces this mindset of correction through compassion. What a wonderful way to conclude this conversation. Gurudev's wisdom certainly offers a powerful guide for living with grace and kindness. Do you have any parting thoughts for our readers? I would encourage everyone to remember that mistakes are a part of life. We all make them, and they are opportunities for growth both for ourselves and for others. When we approach correction with both authority and love, we not only help others grow, but also deepen our own sense of compassion and understanding. My parting thought is to embrace the idea that authority is not about control, it's about guiding someone toward a better path, and love is what makes that guidance welcome and effective. When we bring both into our corrections, we create a space where everyone can flourish together. Thank you both for this enlightening discussion. It's clear that with Gurudev's wisdom as a foundation, we can all learn to correct mistakes with more grace, understanding, and care. Thank you for having us, and Jai Gurudev.